Good morning. Today, the church inaugurates a Jubilee year. Since the 15th century, every 25 years, the church has celebrated God's mercy in some special, unique way. And this year, we celebrate the Jubilee of Hope, as Pope Francis has called it. So what does the gospel help us understand what this Jubilee of Hope? The gospel wasn't planned for the Jubilee. It was inaugurated the Jubilee was inaugurated on the Feast of the Holy Family of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But yet God's grace is so good. The scene for any parent is probably horrifying today. You stop and you think, oh my gosh, there's a big caravan. All the family, all the neighbors, all the cousins are going up into Jerusalem and back. So you just assume your 12-year-old's hanging out with all his friends as they go along the way, and suddenly 3 days into the journey, you find out he's not there. The panic as Mary and Joseph head back to Jerusalem to look for Jesus. 3 days they looked for him. That means 3 nights. That means 3 sleepless nights. It's not like they said, oh, we'll find him tomorrow. Good night, honey. No, they worried and fretted until they finally find him in the temple. And then Mary says, son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety. Now, Mary is the sinless mother of God, so she's not saying this with an ugly anger. She's saying it with confusion. Why have you done this to us? 3 days searching, 3 nights worrying. And then he says to them, why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? This was not the answer I don't think Joseph and Mary were looking for. I think they were sort of hoping like, I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have let you know where I was going. Most parents, I think, would lose their top, steam coming out of the ears. But the response is a shocking one. So Jesus is teaching his mom and dad something in this moment. He's teaching them that the will of the Father is more important than anything that we can imagine. The will of the Father is more important than a parent's sentimental attachment to their child. He's teaching them the most important lesson of all is to trust in God the Father. Mary wants her baby to be safe. But what she has to learn is that Jesus will never be safe. You see, therein lies what the virtue of hope that this Jubilee is calling us to. Not that the hope that Jesus will be okay, but that rather Jesus does the will of the Father regardless of whether or not he's going to be okay. Human emotion is part of hope. We hope for things all the time. I hope the Thunderbirds win. I hope this. It's a desire for the good as we perceive it in our life. A desire that even though things may be hard, it's worth going after. But hope is also a theological virtue, part of faith, hope, and charity, the 3 gifts that are given to us in our baptism. So when we're baptized, we receive these precious gifts, faith, hope, and love, poured into our lives. Not something we deserve, not something that we could go buy, but rather given to us generously from God. So hope is really desiring the ultimate good, even if it's a hard to achieve good. This is the hope that modern society so desperately needs to rediscover, is a theological virtue that God has given us a gift and we need to make that gift present to the world. Like an emotion, the theological virtue is concerned with making sure that what is good is brought about. Even if we don't understand it, even if we are challenged by it, And ultimately, that good is heaven. We say to ourselves, okay, that good is heaven, and my goal is to get there and to bring as many people as I can with me. The goal is to make sure that we get to heaven by bringing heaven here on earth. But God has given us this gift already within our hearts to begin to realize it. Sort of like water flowing through a pipe, so he desires to use us to water the world around us with hope. A trust that God will always bring the good, even if it's a challenging good. Even if it's a moment that is painful, he still will bring, just like he did on the cross of his Son, resurrection. We just have to let hope come alive in our hearts this year. I think the first step to making hope come alive in our heart is to rediscover the hard good. To rediscover that the easiest way is usually not the best way. The challenge is usually therein found to bring about what we call the arduous good. Rather than settling for an instant gratification of what's going to make me happy right now, is to fix our hearts and our minds and our eyes on the greater good that is God's love in the world. And then to embrace that it takes a struggle to make that happen in our world. But because it's a struggle doesn't mean it's bad. Ask any athlete who wears a gold medal around his or her neck. That in the struggle lies the journey that brings about the good. And I think the second step of living hope in our world is that the object of this is always heaven, is always God's love, is always God's will, and that has to be number one in our lives. Everything else will fall into place if that's at the very center of who we are. Everything is secondary to God's love, to God's will. Pope St. Paul VI famously wrote that the world doesn't need teachers. It doesn't need people just to talk to them about who God is. Paul VI said the world needs witnesses. And that's what this year should be. A year where you and I are a witness to the world. We must be living, talking, walking signboards of hope, of knowing and trusting in God's will, even if it's a challenging struggle. To know that we must strive to find Jesus' desire and then do all we can to bring that about. This should be the true New Year's resolution. To know God is the ultimate good and to desire that above everything else. And if we do that, everything else falls into place. And then we must be willing to choose the path of good, regardless of how rocky it might seem. And so, my brothers and sisters, welcome to the journey of the Jubilee year. May we walk this path together as living witnesses of God's hope in the world. I'm going to say, praise be Jesus Christ. Please say now and forever. Praised be Jesus Christ. Now and forever. Amen. And now, confident in God's desire to bring about the good into the world, let's turn to him with our needs.